Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
We know you're busy people, so most of our shows are also on demand on our Scottish Independence podcast channel, available wherever you get your podcasts. You'll see what a great variety of shows we have. There's something for everyone. Our newest on-demand platform is IndyLive Radio's YouTube channel. We have set up playlists for our most popular shows and current topics, currency, disc parties. New content is added almost daily, so subscribe and you won't miss anything. Join us. Thanks for listening.
IndyLive.radio.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
It's not acceptable to say we just keep on trying and we have another mandate and we have another mandate, we keep on trying. You've got to make a political judgment that it's not going to work and say, well, in that case, we have either got to admit that we're not going to go for independence. And this is where I think the government has not been honest with people. That is, I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying that it is at least a possibility. If we hone in totally on Section 30, we could not get a referendum at all under Section 30. And therefore, that to me means that you've got to find another way.
But I don't think anybody who's gone over to yes now is really for moving, because I think they can see clear as day what things look like. And I always felt that during the independence referendum that it would take a no vote in order for a lot of Scots to realise the consequences of voting no. They would have to see what happens when they vote no in order to realise what a mistake it was.
And to me, that's the clear blue water between staying in the UK and going for independence. It's clear, regardless of what Boris Johnson said the other day, that they will want to go back to business as usual, where the ultra-rich are the ones who gain from everything. We don't want to be part of that. We want the chance to actually build a fairer country.
film. You can watch this again. You can be part of it. It's Independence Live. Yeah. A few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
Hello everyone, John Drummond here, host of the TNT Show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on IndyLive. We always have great guests, you know that, and we reach right across the political spectrum, whatever people feel about the constitutional question. And this Wednesday is no exception. We'll be talking the TNT Show, The Nation Talks, to Kenny Farquharson, celebrated Times columnist and journalist. So get your questions in. If you have any questions for Kenny, I'm sure he'll be happy to try and answer them. So write to me at john@cleash.com or contact IndyLive. Get your questions in now. And by all means, please join us 7 p.m. Wednesday. See you then.
Here we are, it's the Yackin Bridge where we started the first 500 miles. In front of that beast there. This is where it all started. We're now in day 4 and we're heading towards Portree. We'll see he's on the road. Sign the covenant. Long walk to freedom. Talk to you later.
Hi there, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Russ.
And we're from
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the new series of Twa Auld Heids with Mike Fennick and myself. And this evening, our guest is somebody we've been trying to get for a while, former ambassador for the UK. You'll probably all know his blogs and probably one of the best adverts for Alcan that you probably see. Craig Murray. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mike.
I chose a theme for this, which I've published as part of a post on Independence Live, because it seems to me to be so appropriate right across everything we're talking about. The theme was that there's no hiding place for the truth. But I then put a question mark, or is there? It just seems to me, times things that I think we're likely to talk about in this session, that is an element that has to be discussed. What is it that is being hidden from us? Why is it being hidden? And what happens when it eventually is revealed? Now, promise, Dave, other than mention that theme, I'll leave it up to you two to decide where we start.
Well, basically, I was thinking that given that Craig is a very well-known journalist who doesn't actually have a press pass at the moment, yet managed to get the best seat in the House at the Julian Assange case down south, we might go there. Have you got anything to tell us on that, Craig?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, the efforts, I mean, in terms of, the truth and hiding the truth, the efforts by the state, the British state, to stop people seeing the Julian Assange trial were quite amazing. They opened the public galleries of 2 adjacent courts with a video stream in one. Each public gallery had 42 seats, and they allowed 5 people into each gallery. And they said, because of COVID and social distancing. Now, in fact, you could have had everyone 2 meters apart, and you could have had 15 people in both in both galleries, with everyone more than 2 meters apart. But they reduced it to 5 people in each public gallery. 5 of which, and half of those seats, the seats actually in the gallery of the main trial itself, where without the video stream, the seats where you could actually see, they were reserved for Julian's family. I am Julian's uncle. Well, I don't know about your family, but we had people we called uncle who weren't actually uncles. They were just friends of my mum and dad or whatever. So I'm Julian's uncle in that sense, we decided. So so I was the only journalist, other than John Pilger, who wasn't there every day, but came in, from day to day, from time to time. We were the only journalists actually in the courtroom. And very few journalists were in, there was a separate video stream for journalists. Very few journalists took advantage of it. James Dolman, I should mention, as another good Scot and another independent supporter who was there every day covering the trial. But the vast majority of the media just didn't bother to cover it. And there's nothing stopping, all the main media, the BBC, from reporting it. And forgive me, I'm talking a long while on this, but a couple of points I want to make. This is a trial where the United States government was arguing, or an extradition hearing, the United States government argued that anyone who possesses US classified information anywhere in the world can be extradited to the United States under the Espionage Act, just for possession of US classified information, even if you don't publish it, just for possession. That's a threat to every journalist that is worldwide. The BBC didn't even publish that fact, ever. The Guardian published 10 times more column inches on the Johnny Depp libel trial than they did on the Julian Assange hearing. And the other thing is, the case is crazy because the US-UK extradition treaty says you cannot be extradited for a political offence. And if what WikiLeaks does is not political, what is political? Plainly, the whole thing shouldn't be happening. So but it was just the media didn't bother to cover it at all in any depth whatsoever. Over 40 NGOs, including Amnesty International, including Human Rights Watch, including PEN, the writers' organization, including Reporters Without Borders, all had their video, they all registered for video feed, they were all granted it, and the judge cancelled it for all the NGOs on the first day. They cancelled it for members of the European Parliament. They said it wasn't in the interests of justice, that there should be wide public speculation on this case. So, no, I mean, in terms of hiding the truth, it was astonishing. And again, if the only really detailed published reports of the trial are mine. I'm the only person who published sort of 3,000 words to 4,000 words every day, giving the detail of all the evidence. And as you know, there's a parallel there with the defense case in the Alex Salmond trial, where the only person who ever published the details of the defense case was me.
That is something I wanted to pick up. I read your reports, Craig. And it wasn't the fact that there is known to be a trial takes you into the question of how that trial is conducted, whether it's fair, whether it's open, whether it allows witnesses to give full test. We're all asked as witnesses to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But from reading your reports, there seemed to be, was it a magistrate lady that was in charge? There seemed to be a curtailment of what people could say and whether they were able to expand on their written statement. Could you comment on that for me, please?
Yeah. I mean, very unusually. Witnesses were confined. Defense witnesses could only give evidence for half an hour in the box. They had a guillotine of 30 minutes in which they weren't allowed to say anything that wasn't already in their written statement. And then after 30 minutes, the prosecution had effectively an unlimited time, although sometimes limits were placed around the 2-hour mark, to cross-examine them and try and shake them. I mean, that was quite astonishing. On top of which, there were certain things witnesses were not allowed to say. One of the things witnesses were not allowed to say was that the United States committed torture, that they committed torture in Guantanamo Bay, that they committed torture in the Extraordinary Rendition Program, or that they committed torture in Iraq. Witnesses were not allowed to say that. And if they said that, then the judge ruled it had to be struck by the record, and the United States got up and objected, because she stated that it was not part of her job to judge whether the United States committed torture or not. And this was completely crazy, because you had witness statements, from example, from El Masri, the guy who was kidnapped in Macedonia by the CIA, taken to Afghanistan and tortured every day for 8 months in a concrete cell in Afghanistan by the CIA. And the European Court of Human Rights has ruled that happened. They ruled on the case. It's established that happened to him. And yet here in the Old Bailey, he wasn't allowed to say in his evidence that he was tortured. That was struck from his evidence. But and everybody in the world knows torture happened in Guantanamo Bay. There's nobody who doesn't know that. So this kind of strange world of fiction that the thing took place in, where certain things, obvious truths, were not allowed to be said as part of the trial. It was disturbing.
Do you think that the new government in America will make any difference to what happens to the extradition, given the fact that Obama was pretty like ready to just sort of let things lie, and then Trump decided he was going to go for them?
It's possible. I mean, there isn't any doubt, and we know this from people who were in the Obama administration, who then spoke as they do or published memoirs and all that stuff after they retire, that the Obama administration decided that they couldn't prosecute Julian Assange because of the First Amendment, because of the protections for freedom of speech and publication in the United States. Whether Biden holds to that, I don't know. I mean, the Biden administration is going to be a pretty right-wing administration, and so I'm not sure. We live in hope that the Obama administration might seek to drop the charges, but a whole raft of new charges were added at the last minute.
Yeah, 18 was it?
I can't remember exactly how many, but there was a whole bunch of them brought in a very few weeks before the start of the hearing. A second superseding indictment, which the defence asked for an adjournment because they had no time to answer these, but the adjournment wasn't granted. And those charges relate to all kinds of things. They relate to they include something about hacking into bank records in Iceland. All things which were nothing to do with WikiLeaks whatsoever. And they're based on a supergrass that the United States have got. And the supergrass the United States have got is a guy who already served time in jail in Iceland for impersonating Julian Assange, for stealing money from WikiLeaks, and also for child sexual offences. He's a paedophile, and this is, this is the super informant that the United States brought in to provide these extra last-minute offences. That, of course, gives the Biden administration the route to continue the prosecution based on things that aren't anything to do with publication, based on with hacking an Icelandic bank and that kind of thing. So that complicates the issue slightly.
Forgive my ignorance in what I'm about to ask you, Craig, but exactly what is the position with Julian Assange at the moment?
He's in Belmarsh, and he's being held as a terrorist, in effect, in Belmarsh high security. And
the effect of the trial leads to what?
It would lead to his extradition to the United States to be charged there under the Espionage Act, to be charged as a spy in the USA.
When do we know that will happen or not happen?
The verdict will be given on the 4th of January. All the signs are. This didn't give any, it gave me no impression. When I was, and I wrote this at the time, this is not hindsight. I wrote during Alex Salmond's trial and published that I had the feeling in the Alex Salmond trial of being part of a genuine, fair process where the judge seemed fair and there was a jury. I had none of that feeling at all at the Julian Assange hearing. The judge never seemed fair to me at any moment. I think undoubtedly they're going to rule for extradition. But then there can be an appeal to the High Court and the Supreme Court. Trouble is, of course, Julian's being held in a maximum security facility with terrorists while all this is going on, and his health is deteriorating very badly. So whether he'd survive a couple of years while we go through the appeal process is a question.
That's why I was asking, because I wasn't sure where we were in relation to everything. He's not allowed much human contact whilst he's in Belmarsh, as I understand it.
At the moment, it's a little bit better. He was held for, I think, about 8 months in solitary confinement, during which time his health deteriorated enormously. He eventually was let out of that as a result of prisoner protests. The other prisoners in the jail went on strike, refused to cooperate, refused to do their allotted tasks or whatever, until he was let out of solitary confinement, which is quite heartwarming in a sense. That's another lovely aspect to this.
Amazing they never used it as evidence that he was colluding with terrorists. Anyway, I hear you might be standing for president of the SNP, Craig.
I am indeed. Yeah. That's back in after, as you know, I campaigned all around the country for the independence referendum in 2014, all up and down, giving speeches all over the place till my voice gave out. And even after my voice gave out, I was still trying to do it. Then, of course, we got through to the 2015 election, and I put up for. I went in for the candidate vetting process and was knocked back on the grounds they didn't think I would accept party discipline. Then I kind of stayed with the SNP despite that and helped campaign for them. Then. Couple of years ago, at the main party conference, I applied to book a room for a fringe meeting on independence, and I was told by Peter Murrell or Morell, I never know which way you pronounce it, that I wasn't allowed to have a fringe meeting on the subject of independence, and I found that very strange. And I asked why. And then they came back saying individuals can't book fringe rooms. It has to be organizations or companies. So then I said, okay, that's great. My company can, I've got a company, runs music festivals. We'll book a room and we'll have a meeting on the subject of independence, because independence didn't feature anywhere. The word independence only was on the agenda in a constitutional amendment. The word independence was nowhere on the conference agenda at that conference. So I said, okay, we'll have a fringe meeting on independence. My company will book the room. And I got an email back from Peter Murrell saying, a company may only book a fringe meeting in order to promote the commercial interests of that company. It may not book a room in order to promote independence. So this is quite remarkable. You weren't allowed to have a meeting on independence at the SNP conference. So I thought, what can I actually do to promote independence within the SNP that they cannot stop me from doing? And I sat down with the party constitution and I suddenly realized there is no mechanism by which Peter Murrell can stop me from standing for president, or by which the National Executive can stop me from standing for president, unless they kick me out of the party. But kicking someone out of the party because they want to stand for election is not a good look. So that, to be honest, that was the genesis of it. Because for me, the SNP has lost focus on independence. I wanted to do something to highlight independence. And the only thing I could find I was allowed to do that gave me any kind of platform to promote independence within the SNP was to stand for president. So that was how it started.
What does that entitle you to achieve, if you like, in terms of the president have powers? Does it have influence?
It's an honorary position. And, like most honorary positions, it is what you make it. You're allowed to...
Gives you a platform, if you like, Craig.
Exactly. And you get to see what's happening. I mean, you're allowed to attend the NEC. You're a member of the NEC. And theoretically, the most senior member of the of the NEC. You're not the chairman, but you are the president. So, it means I would be there. As president, I would attend all NEC meetings. I'd go for all NEC papers. I'd stop any shenanigans to do with blocking Joanna Cherry and all that kind of rubbish that's been happening on the NEC. I'd be a pretty firm voice against all of that. I'd read all the papers very carefully. And I tell you something, I'd be in Party HQ pretty well daily. They wouldn't be able to. I'd be there watching what Murrell and Ruddock. There'd be no trying to fit up members of a party on sex charges or anything like that going on. If I had access, I would insist as party president on seeing papers and on being around. I'd insist on having a wee desk and chair actually in HQ that I can go and sit on and keep an eye on what the hell's happening. And I would campaign for independence. I would get round branches. I would go to public meetings. I'd bang the drum for independence and use it as a platform. Having said all that, I don't think I've got a chance of winning. I mean, it would be extremely improbable that I could beat Mike Russell in an election at a party conference, because that's quite a limited electorate, and a very high proportion of that electorate are the payroll vote.
Yep.
Now, at a party conference now, the number of MPs and MSPs and their staff, and all these other paid staff of the SNP, the staff paid by short money,
yep,
all the organisers for YSI and Student Nationalists, and all these people have full-time organisers, and the professionals within the SNP have become an interest group in themselves, so interested in my view, frankly, more interested in their own careers often than they are in independence. So, and you're up against that whole kind of payroll block vote in any vote at conference. So I think my chances of winning, and that's apart from the fact that Mike Russell, obviously an extremely well-known party figure, minister for years, and somebody who has been dedicated to independence for decades, and who was in the party in the days when it wasn't a good career move, in the days when it could damage your professional career to be a known ardent SNP man. So Mike Russell has a deserved amount of respect in the party. We believe in different things in many ways, but it would be astonishing if I were able to beat Mike Russell. I'm not expecting to do that, but I am expecting to be a focus for people who aren't happy with the SNP's lackadaisical approach to achieving independence, to be able to, and aren't happy with the way the party's being run, the concentration of power, the not listening to members, the not replying to members, all of that stuff. I want a focus for those people who are conference delegates who are able to do so, to vote for me, to say they're not happy. They would prefer to see something different.
I'm biting my tongue at the moment, Craig, because the gentleman that's sitting as I watch this screen is well known for his attitude to what's going on in the SNP at the moment. Dave, over to you.
Well, I don't know whether you'll win against Mike Russell either, Craig, but I'll tell you what, I know that there are at least 100 people, like from our side in the independence debate, have got delegates passes. And that's quite good. And at the end of the day, as I say, like, I don't know, you probably noticed Alan Smith's little tizzy that he had the other day about slates. Well, I've been sharing those slates absolutely off the planet for the last couple of weeks, both the women's slate and the Commonweal one. And so I think there's going to be a lot more public accountability in this conference than there normally is, and it's going to be a lot harder to stage manage because they don't know who these delegates are. Well, they know who some of them are, but the thing is, every one of them is an activist. And you let 100 activists loose in an SNP conference, and it's going to be fun. I can't wait to be a fly in the wall for that one. So I don't think it's necessarily going to be a foregone conclusion, in spite of the payroll vote. Talking about payroll votes, it's like I managed to get myself blocked on Twitter yesterday by Nicola Sturgeon for making a wee statement about what Liz Lloyd was doing with David Clegg in America, and you'll have seen the Wings article. It's like we spoke to Mark Hurst quite a lot about this, the Cozy Club, when people in political power have these little cozy liaisons, shall we say, with the unionist journalists. Anything to say on that?
When the salacious details of the accusation, I went, digging, and I phoned around contacts both contacts in journalism and contacts in politics, to see how the hell this had happened, how this had got released. And the overwhelming feedback that I got was that Liz Lloyd had given it to David Clegg. That was taken as read, as the opinion. And I say the opinion, citing the libel case of Campbell versus Dugdale. That was given as the opinion of those to whom I was talking.
Yeah. That was your feedback, Craig.
That was my feedback. That was the feedback which I obtained overwhelmingly. I mean, not as in, those within the Holyrood bubble, talking of journalists who are accredited to the Holyrood Parliament, and senior people within the SNP and within the Liberal Democrats, because it's no secret I used to be a Liberal Democrat. I'm very sorry, but I did. And so everyone just, well, it was Liz Lloyd. That was the generally the CD feedback I was given by anyone, and that's been my opinion. That's been the general opinion ever since. Now, I'm not saying that's true. I don't know. I have no firm evidence. But what Stuart Campbell wrote was the received wisdom of the Scottish political class. Let me put it that way. And there's no doubt whatsoever that Liz Lloyd, who is Nicola's chief of staff, has been central to the whole attempts to fit up Alex Salmond that we've seen work their way through the courts. She was named in court directly as the person who was coordinating people to make allegations. That was stated in court. And she's the person who phoned Jeff Aberdeen, as was also testified in court, for him to go to that meeting with Nicola, which Nicola forgot, and which disappeared from the diary, and which the Scottish government, even now, is claiming didn't happen, even after Nicola admitted in Parliament it happened, which is quite peculiar. You know, the central role in this of Nicola's chief of staff in the coordination of what was happening is very plain. And when the actions are being coordinated by your chief of staff, and when your husband is organizing the pressure on the police, among other things, I find it quite astonishing. And also when John Summers, Nicola's private secretary, was meeting with one of the complainants, the same complainant whose story was in the Daily Record, story which was found not to be true by the jury, let's not forget that. You've got your private secretary, your chief of staff, and your husband involved. And I find I actually find scary, I find it frightening that people in those circumstances are prepared to say, oh, but Nicola had nothing to do with it. You know, to believe that, you have to have actually switched your brain off and moved beyond rational thought and joined some kind of religious organization.
I mentioned earlier, Craig, before we started recording, that all this reminds me of Watergate and Nixon.
Yeah.
And if you think back to that, it was the chief of staff and the private secretaries who were coordinating everything. They had knowledge of what was going on. And eventually the Supreme Court, because both parties in America went to Nixon and went to the Supreme Court and said, you've got to hand over the tapes. Yeah. That's why I chose the theme of no hiding place for the truth, because it strikes me, I read this morning that John Swinney, I think, is intending to go to the Court of Session to obtain a ruling on whether one very specific paragraph in a letter is to be disclosed or not, when the Information Commissioner has said everything in that letter should be given out. That type of thing, eventually something happens where the truth comes out. It's inevitable. What strikes me at the moment, I just want to mention you very quickly, I've never been, no intention of ever being a member of a political party. The reason for that is I've served on hundreds probably of committees in my life, and they are identical to how politics is organised within a party. But it strikes me as inevitable, despite procrastination, that the truth will eventually come out. And that is where delaying the truth serves no one any good, even those who are trying to delay it, or particularly those who are trying to delay it.
I'm not certain I share your optimism. The particular draft of documents which Alex Salmond has said to the committee he needs them to have before he can give his written evidence, is 95% identical to the same documents I need for my own defense in my own contempt of court case on this issue.
Okay.
The Crown Office have written to my lawyers refusing to release these documents, and about a week ago, the Lord Advocate wrote to the committee that he would refuse to release those documents. And whether things in Watergate you hadn't got a corrupt judiciary in league with the White House. In Scotland, you've got a corrupt Crown Office in league with the First Minister's office, and you've got, a Lord Advocate who is doing everything possible to keep the evidence hidden.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he was the Justice Secretary, John something. He went to prison for trying to help Nixon.
So did the Chief of Staff. The Chief of Staff got 2 years as well.
That's the point I was going to come on to, is that there's a huge danger. If the truth event, I'll say when, and I accept what you're saying, Craig, when the actual truth comes out, the danger that people are putting themselves in for not revealing the truth as the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And that happened in the committee inquiries. Everyone was denying something and then having to come back and admit it.
Rohypnol.
That is a terrible, I don't know. In a modern open democracy, it's not the one I want to live in if that's how we're going to proceed.
No, and this is absolutely astonishing. At least 4, I believe 5 of the civil servants who've given evidence have had to come back and correct their evidence. And the key point here is they've only done so when new documents were taken by the committee, who insisted on having them. They weren't released voluntarily, but proved they were lying. They only admitted they were lying after the documentary proof they were lying came out.
One of which Craig came from the Crown Office.
No, well, that's not. And I think the interesting thing about Kenny McCaskill is the document that was leaked to him, where Peter Murrell's saying now's the time to put pressure on. Kenny had been asking for that document from the Crown Office in writing for some weeks, and the Crown Office had been denying its existence to him. In fact, Wings published the letter the extract from a letter from Lindsay Miller, of the Crown Office, in which she says there is no document, and which was a straightforward lie by the Crown Office. I think that document was leaked to Kenny Miller from within the Crown Office or within the police, because if you've got organisations which are lying about the existence of material, there's always a danger, and it could be a junior clerk. There's somebody honest there who doesn't like what's happening and who will leak it. And I think you're right. I'm veering around your optimism now that they should be very careful. They're trying to deny the existence of material, and yet not everyone who works within the police or the Crown Office is necessarily as corrupt as the people at the top. So they're going to be a leaking ship.
The thing I read, I can't remember A, where I read it, and B, the precise nature of it, but it was a suggestion from one of the authorities in law that the committee had to perhaps be a bit more specific about the actual information they were looking for. And that gave me a degree of hope. Now, I'm not saying that hope is secure, but it wasn't a blank refusal. That was the point I would make.
One of the, I've given in my sworn witness affidavit to the court for my own case. One of the things in that affidavit I say is that this material I'm asking for, which proves the existence of the conspiracy, of which Murrell's tweet about putting pressure on the police was just one item of 20 or 30 items. But this is all stuff I've seen. This is not stuff I don't know about. This is stuff which I was shown while I was investigating the case as a journalist.
Okay.
And which I know the content of. And I've given a brief précis of the content of some of it in my witness statement. And even if they don't release the documents, it's my firm intention to stand in the witness box on oath and tell people what those documents said, because I remember much of what they said, which is one reason why the Crown Office are arguing I should not be allowed to give evidence in my own defence, which is an interesting and unusual argument. It's very unusual that somebody faces a charge on which they can be sent to jail for 2 years and you don't allow them in the witness box because you're worried about what they're going to say. That seems to me, again, that we're moving down a very, very dangerous road if we're doing that kind of thing.
I know Dave was talking about, I can't remember, Dave, you were talking about the cost to the public purse of inquiries into Rangers and what's come. Would you like to develop on that a bit?
Well, as you've seen a couple of days, the Lord Advocate has admitted another malicious prosecution. This one's going to cost him 20 million. So basically, so far, the Lord Advocate over the past 4 weeks has admitted 3 malicious prosecution cases, which are now going to cost us 34 million quid. And if you think $500,000 for Alex Salmond was a lot, this is a lot worse. How it's been done is not necessarily a lot worse. I mean, there doesn't appear to be an innocent man being sent to jail for the rest of his life, but this is a public servant who is a part of the government, who is the head of the judiciary, has admitted 3 things that if he did that as a lawyer, he would be struck off.
Yep. And the other thing in my sworn affidavit to court,
yep,
the other thing I say is that the Crown Prosecution Service, under the Lord Advocate, is corrupt and is acting corruptly, and acted corruptly in the Alex Salmond prosecution, and is acting corruptly in my prosecution. And I put down evidence as to why I believe that, and I have sworn to that on oath and entered it into court. So
that's why I asked Dave to intervene at that point, because excuse me, if you're being refused to give evidence in your own behalf, Craig, that is tantamount to malicious prosecution. It cannot be the case that you're accused of something and not allowed to be able to answer what you're accused of. It just strikes me as completely anomalous.
What the Crown is attempting to say is that my articles were in contempt of court because I wasn't allowed to publish what I published, and whether what I published is true or not is irrelevant. So they're saying that, I published articles saying there was a conspiracy to pit up Alex Salmond. The truth of the conspiracy or not is irrelevant to the fact that I wasn't allowed to publish it, even if it's true. So, and as my evidence goes to the truth of the existence of the conspiracy, that's irrelevant. Our argument, of course, is that, if I was uncovering a genuine conspiracy to fit up Alex Salmond, there's a very strong public interest in that truth being known, especially when that conspiracy involves the Crown Office and the Government of Scotland at the highest levels. And that therefore, as the truth about a government conspiracy, this was protected speech under the European Convention of Human Rights and my right to free speech. So you can't stop me attempting to prove the truth of what I published. And the documents prove the truth of what I published, which is why they are trying to withhold the documents. And the whole thing is Kafkaesque, and it's also very. Is it not astonishing that we're sitting here discussing this in these terms in Scotland today? They're trying to send me to prison for publishing that there's a conspiracy to fit up the former First Minister, and they're arguing that the truth of the conspiracy is irrelevant. I mean, that whole thing as a scenario, if you'd submitted it for a book a couple of years ago, people would have thought it was too wild a fiction.
How's your funding for legal defence, etc., Craig?
We're okay for now. The Crown still haven't put in their major arguments as to how they prove jigsaw identification and that kind of thing. The court's asked them to do that. The Crown keep not being ready. We've had, I think, 3 preliminary hearings so far, and none of which anything happens because the Crown's always not done whatever it is the Crown has to do next. And each preliminary hearing eats up about 25,000 quid. And one possible interpretation is that the Crown Office are quite deliberately spinning this out as long as they possibly can, because you run out of money. By the time we finish the case, and at the moment the trial date is set for, I think, 2021 January, but it's been put back twice already, so I'm not certain that will end up being the final trial date. But by the time we finish it, we're going to have spent the best part of 200,000 bloody quid, and for publishing something that is true. It's astonishing. The weaponization of the and the use to prosecute people from who are strong independent supporters. Nope, that huge amounts of stuff. You can go through social media over the last couple of years, and the amount of stuff published before the trial saying that Alex Salmond was guilty and attacking Alex Salmond and calling him a pervert, all of which was prejudicial to the trial. Nobody is being charged for any of that.
Yep.
Danny Garavelli did far more towards naming or pointing towards the names of defendants than I ever did, as we've proven by an opinion poll, and as frankly everybody knows, and she's not being trialed. Neither, there's no unionist being got at for anything here. This is a political persecution of those people who are strong independent supporters.
I'm going to say something which I don't want to make light of the seriousness of this. Using your knowledge as an ambassador, using your knowledge of the internal mechanisms of governments, what's the possibility that GCHQ have all these documents on electronic record somewhere?
Well, I'm sure they do, and my strong expectation is that that people underestimate how much they know, and people think you can avoid them by using WhatsApp or Signal or whatever. The effort they put in, they have thousands of staff and they have budgets in the billions of pounds, and the amount, the sheer volume of material they gather and store, and the sheer breadth of the people they're targeted on, and they are very definitely targeted on the Scottish independence movement because they see that as the biggest single threat to the United Kingdom. They'll know all of that. They almost certainly already know who leaked that material to Kenny McCaskill, for example. But it'll be someone. It's very often the case that it's too embarrassing for them to go or to go after whoever leaked it. That they probably don't want a situation where it comes out that they've been hiding this material. So it's best for them not to pursue it at the moment. But
my interest, Craig, if I can develop the theory, is for a reason I'm asking, basically is whether or not they also use that material. It's well known that if you pressurize someone on information they do not want to be released, you can pull them into a web that they don't particularly want to be in, but they're forced to be in. That's not unknown, and your experience will tell you that.
Oh yeah, no, that I mean, blackmail in effect is one of the ways intelligence, it's a standard way intelligence agencies operate via blackmail. I'm not sure that's at play here. The people often, undoubtedly, there will be people at senior levels, both Scottish politicians and people within the civil service or the Crown Office or different parts of the administration of justice, who are agents for the UK security services for one reason or another. And that might be unionist patriotism. It might be they're being blackmailed. Most often, and one thing people don't understand about intelligence work, and particularly human intelligence work, is that the vast majority of it is money. The intelligence services pay people for intelligence, so that's how most of it's done. When I was in the British diplomatic service, when I was at the British Embassy in Poland, for example, I used to have to take out, $100,000, $200,000 in cash and hand it over to the head of station of MI6 for him to go off and give to people in exchange for intelligence. And you very often, it's a lot less complex than people think. It's much less often a case that someone that they know about someone's love life and they're blackmailing them into cooperation. Much more often, it's a case that they're simply stuffing large amounts of money towards them.
There was me hoping somebody was going to try to honey trap me.
Oh, I've been honey trapped many times. I always made a point of falling into it. I always used to. When I was a diplomat, I always used to put makeup on my ass so it didn't look shiny in the photos.
I'm not cutting that bit out.
That's one for the members, Craig. Let me move on just slightly. I said to Dave, I will not spend time on this. I have a petition ongoing in the Petitions Committee at the moment. I started deliberately, and it's based on the experience I have of dealing with these things, by addressing the question of human rights in relation to the Referendums Act that was passed. The committee thankfully referred it to the Law Society of Scotland. The Law Society of Scotland came back and dealt with the difference between your human rights and your right to vote in an election, and the fact that it has been established that you have no such right to vote, no right at common law to vote in a referendum. Now, that was established in a court case in Scotland. So I think we're in a position where we start understanding how the law affects us on our right to vote. It might be surprising, but the main point I was after, and the committee have finally begun to understand it, is that if there's a problem with interference in an election, in a referendum, you have to, one, produce the evidence within a period of 8 weeks, and two, take it to the Court of Session, which is obviously going to cost money. And in my last submission to the Petitions Committee, I said, right, assume that irrefutable evidence. Now, you'll know the Intelligence Committee recently reported on the Russia report. Assume that there is irrefutable evidence of some wrongdoing of real importance, but you only have that evidence on 8 weeks plus 1 day, because the current Section 39 says you have 8 weeks to put all this together. Now, I use America as an example of this as going on at the moment, which is there is evidence and there is false accusation. Mr. Trump is using, he has evidence. No, he doesn't. But there could also be, and that's what the Intelligence Committee came up in their report. It took 4 years, 5 years for that report to come out. I think the Petitions Committee, at least 3 people on the Petitions Committee, have now begun to understand that. So they're now writing to the Scottish Government again to say, if there is evidence after the 8 weeks, what's the resolution? I'll be interested in the answer to that, Craig. And it's to do with intelligence, it's to do with interference. During the American election, it's known that the American intelligence services started to penetrate the Russian areas where there was hackers. It was known that GCHQ did exactly the same thing to the Russians. And we've had 77th Brigade say we are ready to fight at that level right across the world, and we've got the power to do it. Behind all of that is my simple question: is Scotland prepared? Is an independent Scotland prepared? Day after independence, who are we phoning to govern our intelligence services? At the moment, it would appear we have to go and speak to the UK's GCHQ. We're not prepared. We want independence, but I think there's a huge amount of preparation yet to be done. Thank you for allowing me to say all that.
I think that there are a number of things to say. That, I mean, what we don't want to do is replicate the bad things about the UK state. And most of what much of what GCHQ does is bad. Neither GCHQ and NSA, which is the American equivalent, are not allowed, both of them are not allowed to spy on their own citizens, but they swap all intelligence. So GCHQ does the electronic spying on the Americans, and NSA does the electronic spying on the Brits. Now, in fact, that's purely a fiction. In fact, each of them do, spy on their own people, but with a different hat on. And of course, that's all part of what Ansakoulis was doing in the country as well, which is another story. I don't want us to have, our spy agencies have been used more in the service of neo-imperialist wars abroad than they have in the service of actually keeping us safe. And if you look at Ireland as a good example, they have a far, far, far smaller and far less expensive intelligence service, and that really hasn't done them any harm, because a lot of these threats are massively exaggerated. The idea that the Chinese state is sitting there thinking, when do we launch a big cyber attack on Scotland? It's just a nonsense. And I think it's extremely important that we don't. And it's one thing that worries. It's another thing that worries me about the direction of the SNP. You've got this defence report, which isn't going to be released to the public till Tuesday, but which is being trailed, coming out by Stuart MacDonald and Alan Smith, in which they're trying to outflank the Tories to the right by being even more anti-Russian. And as far as I'm concerned, an independent Scotland will be a friend of Russia, and we should be looking to Russia and China as sources of investment in an independent Scotland, not as enemies. So, and this is different from your point. Your point on an 8-week cutout on electoral malpractice, I think that's true. That needs to be addressed. But from the point of view of intelligence services, no, they need to be much smaller. There's no shortage whatsoever of Scottish people working within the British intelligence services. In fact, we won't be able to employ all of them, because we would end up with a much bigger service than we actually need. But I think we need our own threat assessment that will be different to the UK threat assessment.
If you become president, would you please put that as one item on the agenda? The second one is, the day after independence, who's going to be the head of the Scottish Civil Service at that point?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. Not Leslie Evans, anyway.
It's that type of thing that I sit down and say, yes, I am passionate about independence, but we've got to prepare certain things, and I can't find much in the way of preparation going on.
No, but I think that's because, in my view, that's because the people currently in charge of the SNP aren't serious about achieving independence. And you'll find the amount of work going on things like the internal market bill. The SNP was going on about the boundaries for the next Westminster election.
Yeah.
There's not going to be another Westminster election in Scotland.
Exactly.
The SNP should stop thinking about the next Westminster election in Scotland. An SNP which is thinking about a Westminster election in Scotland in 4 years' time is not doing its job, which is to attain independence within the next 4 years, within the next 2 years. And same with the internal market bill. I don't care what's in the internal market bill, because we're not going to be part of the UK. The SNP's got to stop wasting its time and all this bitmap rubbish and actually think about independence. And you're right. But that's why nothing's being done, because they have no serious intention of that question arising, because they have no serious intention of attaining independence. And I genuinely don't think they do. I think you saw that article by what's his name, Andrew Wilson, saying independence by 2026 maybe. I think that's the earliest they're thinking. You're right. I think independence is something that's going to happen very quickly and can happen very, very quickly. And we have to get our act together. The great thing is, of course, it did happen very quickly in Estonia, in Latvia, in Slovenia, in so many of these EU countries, and they all
66 days.
Yeah, they all managed.
In many ways, Craig, that's where I head, is to simply sit down and say, like, if we want to prepare, maybe it's the yes movement that's got to do this. If we want to prepare, we need to start establishing contact with Estonia from the electronic surveillance point of view and the intelligence service. We need to make contact with Iceland to find out how they set up their financial regulation after they put the bankers in jail. There's a whole load of outreach that I think the yes movement have got to start doing, saying, look, how do we go about doing this? And that's the type of preparation I'm talking about.
No, you're right. And Commonweal are very good.
Absolutely.
They're almost the only people doing any serious preparation for independence.
Being ignored.
being ignored and frozen out. But Commonweal, some of the stuff they're doing is excellent. And there are others who are doing good work. None of it is being done within the SNP, who if they have any concrete plan to obtain to put independence into action in the next couple of years, where is it? It's difficult.
Boris, can we have a section 30?
Yeah, exactly. Which is never going to happen. And we haven't talked about it, but the most obvious point that can be made, I think, is that the notion that the more certain the Tories are they will lose a referendum, the more likely they are to grant a referendum.
Yeah.
It's so obviously mad that it really doesn't bear debating, but that appears to be the official line. Oh, if we're 60%, then they'll have to grant a referendum. No, if we're 60%, they will never grant a referendum. But they're not interested in Scottish independence in any circumstances. They want to hang on to our resources.
That's where John Major came in with his idea of 2 referendums.
Yeah, and they'll come up with ideas which are tricks to make them look less bad. And there'll be a few. And on top of which, John Major is not, he's a Tory, but he's not as bad as Boris Johnson. He's not. Johnson and his lot just be prepared to just brazen it out, say no, 40 years, no.
Dave, I kind of sidetracked. Let's bring you in. Sorry.
I put up a post this morning that was rather tongue-in-cheek, but I thought, well, Dominic Cummings is now looking for a job, and he's got a history of being able to get people out of unions, so maybe we should offer him a job.
But we've already got, what's his name, Murray Foote, and we've already got the Duke of Buccleuch's estate manager, and we've already got, in terms of surrounding ourselves with right-wing advisors, we're already well onto that. And in fact, it almost wouldn't make me surprised to see Dominic. The scary thing is if Dominic Cummings did come into the group of advisors surrounding Nicola, Dominic Cummings would actually fit in fairly well.
But he also knows where all the bodies are buried in Westminster, and he's got an axe to grind. Aye, sorry about that, guys. Basically, we had a wee technical problem there, so it's changed the place everybody's sitting in. But we're back with myself, Mike, and Craig in different seats, but talking the same stuff. So, would you like to carry on?
We only have your word for that, Dave. I'm not sure. Anyway, Craig, I wanted to go back on to things where we're not prepared.
Right.
Reverend Stuart Campbell did an article about Trident recently, where he was arguing that allowing Trident to be retained in Scotland was a very, very good negotiation manoeuvre, because our UK would not have any place to put it. Even if they decided to put it somewhere, it would take them years to do it. And Scotland, as the only place that could receive nuclear weapons, would be in a position to charge what it liked. I wasn't convinced by the argument, because I don't think the majority of, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think there's an awful lot of people want to see nuclear warheads removed from Scotland immediately. Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, I should say I'm definitely on the side of people who want them removed immediately. Stuart's right in that potentially it is a valuable negotiating point, but it depends whether you believe WMD are a question of how much they're worth, or whether you believe they're immoral, full stop. And I think WMD are immoral, and I want them out of Scotland. But my argument is that if they're left in Scotland, if they remain in Scotland after independence, then they're ours. They're on our territory. They're under our control, and we should then go to the United Nations and we should call for assistance and finance for dismantling them, just exactly the same as Ukraine did with the strategic nuclear weapons left by the Soviet Union on Ukrainian territory. It's a very good precedent in international law. I argued this on social media, and of course people came back saying, "Oh, it would never happen. The British government would never allow you to do it." Well, the only way they can stop you from doing it is taking them away. So because once we're a sovereign state, they can't do anything on our territory other than invade us, and that would be a war. But if we made plain, absolutely plain, that on independence, if they're still on our territory, we will decommission them, that would be a powerful incentive to the British government to take them away well before independence. And as you're right, they have nowhere they can operate them from. And Stuart is right. It would take a minimum of 6 years. And given the history of public sector contracts recently down in England, it'd probably take them 12 to 15 years to actually construct and build a base, and both the submarine base and the handling facilities for the warheads. So they would become, in effect, non-operational for a decade. And I think having less nuclear missiles in the world operational for a decade is a good thing. I actually was slightly perturbed during, I think, one of the debates of Alistair Darling it was, Alex Salmond seemed to indicate during the last IndyRef campaign that we would be prepared, to have a period of, say, 6 years when they were still here in Scotland while England built new bases for them. I'd be very much against that. Our object should be to stop the things operating from Scotland on day one of independence, and that's what I would support. And I don't think Stuart's wrong about the fact they would be a strong bargaining chip, but I don't want them to be a bargaining chip. I want, ideally, I would like them destroyed, and they definitely want to see them out of Scotland. And if we do that in a way that means that for a long while they're non-operational, I think that's a good thing for the world.
One of the reasons that Dave and I have wanted you on for so long, Craig, is you've got a background from your diplomatic experience of being able to cast a judgment on how governments will look at these things. I would view it from a purely personal point of view without necessarily having the capacity to say, well, how would a government react if it was a bargaining chip as opposed to its immediate removal? But it again comes back to this preparation thing. A lot of things I don't think will be decided by the day of independence. There are a lot of things need to be prepared for, and that to me is like many things, is an obvious example.
Well, for me, I know you.
You go ahead, Dave.
Basically, I would say that the warheads should be moved on day one, and if it takes them longer time to actually move their subs, they can have longer on that if they pay the money. But the warheads need to be taken out on day one.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy with that. But storing the warheads in itself, they've got storing and service facilities for them. Yeah, they'd probably have to send them back to the United States. But again, that's a good result.
Yeah.
Good result.
We've run for just over an hour, Dave.
Yep.
Any other subjects you want to bring up, or yourself?
One wee thing I could think about. George Caravan wrote an article about a month ago where he fantasised about this thing about Alex Salmond coming up at the last minute and with a political party, and basically launching himself on the list in the May elections, where if he got the if he ended up as the opposition, which with 30% of the vote that he got in the Wings poll, he could, the hypothetical situation could arise where the leader of the opposition could stand up in Holyrood and put forward a date for Indy Ref 2 and dare the SNP to vote it down. How good would that be?
It's a lovely idea. I mean, my view on the idea of list parties is that, and it is undeniably true, but a huge number, but in most of the country, SNP second votes are completely wasted and don't elect anyone. They just don't, other than in the borders and the northeast. And at the next election, all the signs are at the moment that the SNP might win all the constituent seats, which is going to give them close to no list seats at all. So why would we do that if there was a chance that other independence favouring parties were able to pick up seats? The trouble is, of course, in practice, it's very hard for unknown parties to pick up seats, and we've seen, Rise, of course, was maybe a lesson. People, they did far less well than I think they expected to do, and we've seen solidarity. We've seen not since the days when the Scottish Socialist Party was led by Tommy Sheridan and did make a breakthrough, but that's some time ago, and the world's a different place. It seems to me, for me at the moment, the SNP, I would like it to be far more focused on independence. Let me put it this way: the SNP is the only vehicle we have at the moment capable of driving to independence. At the moment, I'm not sure it's pointing in that direction. What I want to do is get in the vehicle and drive it towards independence, as opposed to start building a brand new vehicle, which is, hard work. So I've stuck with the SNP, and my view is that the vast majority of SNP members, what they want is independence, and that the leadership has stopped being responsive to the vast majority of SNP members. And I think, so for me, I'm concentrating on getting the SNP pointing in the right direction, in the direction of independence.
I think it's the frustration that the majority of the Yes movement feel over that factor, Craig, that has led to people looking at list votes and saying, can we achieve something and force the issue, as Dave was saying, whether Alex Salmond went in that direction. Your problem with that is you need to have a certain threshold of votes to get an election. And the more alternative list parties you have, you reduce every chance of getting to that threshold. And that's the problem we have at the moment. That might change between now and next May, but at the moment, that would be my worry.
I think that's right. And I think they, if they're going to get anywhere, they need to consolidate. But just the way politics operates and the way the media operates, I think it would take, if Alex Salmond decided he was starting his own list party, that would be a game changer, undoubtedly. That would change all calculations. And I'm quite sure what George Caravan says is true, that a list party led by Alex Salmond could become the official opposition in Holyrood. And that would be, you would have to be a peculiar you'd have to be a peculiarly tribal member of the SNP not to welcome that idea, that you have a pro-independence SNP in government and a pro-independence party as the major opposition. That plainly would be a great situation. Whether Alex actually wants to do that, is a different question, and I'm not sure whether he wants to make a political comeback at this stage in his career. But for any of the list parties without Alex Salmond to achieve that is really quite difficult. It needs a very big figure. And at the moment, all of the big figures are remaining within the SNP.
Retiring.
Because the Yes movement doesn't have potential leaders. And the great thing about the Yes movement is it's diverse. It is its diversity. It is the fact that it isn't a leader worshipping movement. It's all different people. That was what's so wonderful about the 2014 referendum. I remember I was taking part in a pretty spontaneous big crowd that gathered at the Wellgate in Dundee on, I think, the Saturday before the referendum. And we were campaigning and giving out leaflets and just doing stuff. I was waiting for a meeting there that afternoon, but we were just doing whatever came to hand to sort of approach shoppers, go, whatever. And it turned into quite a big crowd. And the BBC actually turned up and said, "Who's in charge?" And we all looked at each other and said, "Well, no one." This is actually the people of Dundee spontaneously here. Yeah. No one's organised this. Nobody is in charge. And the BBC couldn't cope with that, and not being able to find anybody wearing a suit. They didn't interview anyone. So in a sense, that's the strength of the Yes movement. It's not led by people in suits. But it does mean that it's hard to think of a figure who could lead for some reason, and it's partly to do with the way the media is set up. It's very hard for a collective to become electorally successful. You do need to have a leader, and it's hard to think of a figure within the Yes movement, not in the SNP, who would be able to coalesce the different Yes groups behind them and would be taken seriously enough by the media and by the electoral process for them to be able to lead a party to success other than Alex Salmond. I can't really think of anyone immediately. And there are people within the SNP, if they left the SNP and went to form their own party, might be able to do that. But within the Yes movement, it's very hard to think who could do that. So I think my own view is that, and don't get me wrong, I wish well to the ISP and the Alliance and the other potential list parties. I wish them very well, but at the moment, I don't see that as a way to go.
Strange thing is, Craig, if today there was a referendum, the Yes movement, despite its diversities, would vote yes.
Yeah,
it's the denial of the right to vote that I get. When we started off, I said I don't get heated about many things. I tend to sit back and try and coldly calculate. But the one thing I get heated about at the moment is that I don't see that it's Westminster that's denying our independence. I don't see it's Boris Johnson. I think the denial of democracy and the right to vote yes, to make your country, to regain the independence of a sovereign state, resides in Scotland. And that to me is absolutely appalling.
I think, what's been an eye-opener for many people, I think, is the fact that the Scottish Government and the Lord Advocate have been actively working against Martin Keating's attempts in the court to prove that we don't need a Section 30 order. Yep. And my own opinion is the SNP leadership are hiding behind Boris Johnson and hiding behind the Section 30 order. The truth is Scotland is a nation with the right of self-determination in international law. And the truth is that the UK leaving the EU has completely changed the situation. Because in the world of, you were saying that, you're glad to have me on because of my diplomatic experience, because of knowing how governments work.
Yeah.
And in the real world, in the world of the realpolitik, the European Union is a club of member states who back each other up. And the reason they backed Spain against Catalonia, there's nobody in the European Union, except perhaps Orban in Hungary, but pretty well everyone else was revolted by what the Spaniards did to the Catalans, by those terrible paramilitary thugs beating up grandmothers, all that stuff. Everyone thought it was awful, but the iron rule of the EU is they back each other up. And the UK no longer has that protection. The UK is now seen as an enemy of the European Union in political terms, in stark political terms. And the UK example is the biggest threat to the European Union. So for the UK to split up as a result of meeting the EU would be the best thing the European Union could hope for, because it would show what happens to you if we leave the EU. For me, you have to think of the EU in terms of institutional self-interest. It would be delighted if Scotland went back into the EU. Absolutely delighted. It'd be delighted if Boris Johnson got a bloody nose from Scottish independence. So, the diplomatic circumstances surrounding the recognition of Scotland as an independent state are extremely strong, and it's the opposite effect of the Catalan effect. And the Catalans had the EU against them because the interests of a member state were above Spain. The UK is no longer a member state, and the EU in fact has the opposite political interest than it did in the Catalan case, and it's that hard-nosed political interest which would judge international reaction, and the rest of the world will follow the EU on Scottish independence. The developing world would anyway be inclined to be sympathetic towards Scotland on the anti-colonial narrative. So for me, going ahead, personally, I would declare independence, then hold a referendum, as opposed to hold a referendum, then declare independence. Because then you get to control the referendum, doing it as a sovereign state. But I'm reasonably open to doing it the other way around. I don't think there's any doubt now. When you consider, that campaigning took us up in the last referendum, took us up from 30% to 45%.
Yeah.
And I'm quite convinced that the arguments only point one way. Wherever we start, we will end up higher again. If we start at 55, we'll end at 65. So we should be going for it. We should not be holding back. There's no reason to hold back.
Dave knows, and he's annoyed at me. I'm working on something which might help in a small way to achieve what you're suggesting, Craig, but I'm not ready to go public on it yet. I'm just working on it.
Okay. As long as it's not assassinating Boris Johnson.
I think there's enough people wanting to do that already. One thing I would say though, after your wee comment about the Spanish, I hear you're going to witness in a court case across there quite shortly. You better be careful.
Yeah, no, that's going to be fascinating. You're right. It's the case against the Spanish company that was employed by the CIA to spy on Julian Assange in the embassy, and also spent a lot of time spying on me apparently. And the lawyers for the prosecution against the company say that the CIA seemed obsessed with me, which made me feel quite proud. I might have that on my tombstone when I go, Craig Murray, the CIA were obsessed with him.
As well as the Daily Record.
The CIA and the Unionists hated him. That's quite a...
Can I suggest we don't wind up with you mentioning your tombstone, Lex? Thanks very, very much, Craig, for being with us and spending time with us. It's been great.
Absolutely, it's been worth the wait. Hopefully, it'll not be too long before the next one.
No, we'll make it not. And thank you. It's been very, very enjoyable.
Thanks very much, Craig.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On Guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
This is a new voice for a new Scotland.
We know you're busy people, so most of our shows are also on demand on our Scottish Independence podcast channel, available wherever you get your podcasts. You'll see what a great variety of shows we have. There's something for everyone. Our newest on-demand platform is IndyLive Radio's YouTube channel. We have set up playlists for our most popular shows and current topics, currency, list parties. New content is added almost daily, so subscribe and you won't miss anything. Join us. Thanks for listening.
Radio.
It's not acceptable to say we just keep on trying and we have another mandate and we have another mandate, we keep on trying. You've got to make a political judgment that it's not going to work and say, well, in that case, we have either got to admit that we're not going to go for independence. And this is where I think the government has not been honest with people. That is, I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying that it is at least a possibility. If we hone in totally on Section 30, we could not get a referendum at all under Section 30. And therefore, that to me means that you've got to find another way.
But I don't think anybody who's gone over to yes now is really for moving, because I think they can see clear as day what things look like. And I always felt that during the independence referendum that it would take a no vote in order for a lot of Scots to realise the consequences of voting no. They would have to see what happens when they vote no in order to realise what a mistake it was.
And to me, that's the clear blue water between staying in the UK and going for independence. It's clear, regardless of what Boris Johnson said the other day, that they will want to go back to business as usual, where the ultra-rich are the ones who gain from everything. We don't want to be part of that. We want the chance to actually build a fairer country.
Film, you can watch this again, you can be part of it. It's Independence Live. Yeah, a few people asked about YouTube. It'll be YouTube/Independence Live. That's where you'll find the footage.
Never miss a live stream. The What's On Guide to live stream events and shows now has its own website. You can find the guide at whatsonguide.scot, independencelive.net, or on multiple Facebook pages. Do you create your own live stream events and shows? Get them registered on the guide. See whatsonguide.scot for full details.
Hello, everyone. John Drummond here, host of the TNT Show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on IndyLive. We always have great guests, you know that. And we reach right across the political spectrum, whatever people feel about the constitutional question. And this Wednesday is no exception. We'll be talking the TNT Show, The Nation Talks, to Kenny Farquharson, celebrated Times columnist and journalist. So get your questions in. If you've any questions for Kenny, I'm sure he'll be happy to try and answer them. So write to me at john@cleash.com or contact IndyLive. Get your questions in now. And by all means, please join us 7 p.m. Wednesday. See you then.
Here we are, it's the Yackin Bridge where we started the first 500 miles. In front of that beast there. This is where it all started. We're now in day 4 and we're heading towards port 3. We'll see he's on the road, sign the covenant, long walk to freedom. Talk to you later.
Hi there, I'm Cliff.
And I'm Russ.
And we're from the Veterans for Scottish Independence 2.0 group. And we're just invading your privacy today to let you know that we will be very shortly pushing a programme out on live stream to do with the veterans, their needs as it will be during an independent campaign. The next independence campaign, and indeed in an independent Scotland.
So get yourself in gear, come and join us, pull up a sandbag.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.
I saw you weeping outside the seat of power. As you reflected on Scotland's wilting flower, a new horizon was all that really mattered. But dawn had broken as dreams and hopes lay shattered. The storm grew Wednesday in the meadows. The troops were gathering as Alba's future led us. Sing freedom's anthems, all nations join together. We shall be heard, our chains released forever. Change future rising. Lies and deceit from traitors was surprising. You showed the way and gave us inspiration. The seeds are sown to once more be a nation. Don't give up hoping and don't despair. The winds of change are blowing and a gale is on its way. A sea of soul ties were sailing in the sky. Oh, proudly saying
It's a song I wrote about 5 minutes ago called Carpe Diem, Hope Over Fear. Are you threatened by words from an empire of money and gold? Will you trade in your country's potential for the lies you've been sold? Are you scared that the walls are too high to be breached by the bold? Will you stand and be counted or shut up and do what you're told? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Let the TV man call you a nationalist for rejecting the lies. Are the wolves of the few off the bob cause they wear shirts and ties? When they tell you that Scotland's no great, are you really surprised? Will you stand and be counted for something that money can't buy? Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. you happy that nuclear weapons are dumped on the Clyde? Fighting wars for the wealth of the few, how many have died? You can bury my bones, but the truth of it can't be denied. Will you stand and be counted, 'cause I'll be there stood by your side. Hope over fear, don't be afraid. The Westminster Tories of Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, will you seize the day? Rip the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave. Will the media tell you that England don't want you to go? And the taxpayer-funded MPs tell you just tell them no. No! But in Manchester, Nottingham, Sheffield, they already know that we're fighting for them, and it's only the start of the show. Ha ha! Hope over fear, don't be afraid. Tell Westminster Tories that Scotland's no longer your slave. Carpe diem, my friend, will you seize the day? With the chains from the unicorn, Scotland's no longer your slave.